So I've been at Cal State Fullerton since 2000, and I love it there. It's a great place to be. I do a combination of science education-based research and some ecology-based research. I'm trained as a songbird biologist, so I know about bird song and how a lot of my earlier work was done working with folks that investigated how songbirds learn how to sing and how they produce the sounds that they make. And today's talk is something that we've been working on for the past couple of years. It doesn't have anything to do with song and song production. I had an undergraduate student who was interested in nests and how nests work, and I said, well, I don't know anything about nests, let's find out about them. And we started investigating nests, and nests are really hard to find unless you're working with something like terns, in which they're just kind of scrapes, right? So we were, set up with this problem. How do we investigate nests when you can't find nests because birds don't want you to find their nests? So we had this idea, she had this idea, to look at bluebirds, because bluebirds are second cavity nesters. They nest in holes in trees, in dead trees. And in Orange County, unfortunately, there aren't a lot of dead trees. People take down their dead trees because they have a tendency to fall on their houses or fall down. And so what's happened is the Southern California Bluebird Club has gotten together. They make these nest boxes that are bluebird specific, and they place these nest boxes across the county in parks and cemeteries and golf courses. And so the bluebirds will readily nest in these boxes. They do a great job in there. And because of that, we know where the nests are. And so we approached the Bluebird Club, and they've been awesome in terms of partnering with us, letting us partner with them, actually, to use some of their boxes and investigate the form and function of bluebird nests. And so that's what I want to tell you a little bit about today. Okay? So there's a whole slew of people that have been involved with this, and undergraduates, students from Santiago Canyon College, some graduate students, some other faculty at Cal State Fullerton, the Southern California Bluebird Club I've already mentioned, several parks, golf courses, country clubs, and cemeteries. And then we have gotten a little bit of money from several sources to help support the program, help students do this. And we have to be official with all of the work that we do, so we have to have permits in order to get to do the work that we do. So we have an animal care and use permit, even though with the nests we're not actually dealing with the animals, and we have what's called a U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service salvage permit so that we can collect the nests. So here are some of the folks that are involved with this. This is Ellen Sorensen. She was an undergrad, and she was the one who came to me originally and said, hey, I'm interested in nests. And then some other folks, Gilda and Jeannie and Austin and Brittany and Sally and one of the Bluebird Club members helping our students out in the field, Robert, and then, of course, the birds themselves, right? They are the champions of the story here, and so those are our bluebirds. And let's see here, what's next? So what we've really been investigating are three things, and I want to tell you about those three things. The first thing is, how do nests function in terms of insulating the developing eggs and developing young? And Ellen and Eduardo have been key in that. And then follow-up studies about nest structure. So what are the nests made of? How are they put together? And what are some of the trashy things that they put in their nests? So we have several people who've been working on the natural materials, several people who've been working on the man-made materials. And then I have a new student who's just started her project, Natalia, and she was an intern here as a graduate student, as an undergrad at Long Beach. She worked here, I guess, and she is working on the effect of noise pollution on reproductive success in bluebirds. And so that's her project. And I'm not going to talk about that, but I wanted to mention her because she's connected here, and some of you know her. And she always has such great things to say. I was telling Jay about this. Great things to say about about being down here. So I think she misses it. Okay. So nests. You all know about nests, right? They provide protection for the developing eggs. They provide protection from predators and parasites and harsh environments. They insulate the eggs, right? So to help keep the body heat in there while the eggs are developing before they hatch. And there's been some stuff that's been done that shows that birds build bulkier nests in colder locations than in warmer locations. Why do they do that?
More insulation.
More insulation helps keep them warm. Absolutely. And that's pretty well documented that the bulkier nests or in colder areas or during the early part of the season, if they're an early nest builder, they put more feathers, they line more feathers in the nests, especially in colder environments. Now, Southern California isn't so cold, so we were left wondering, could something like this be happening here with local birds? So I kind of already talked about this, right? We chose the western bluebird because it's a second cavity nester. And the brilliant thing about bluebirds is they typically lay 2 clutches of eggs a year. So they'll lay 1 clutch, 1 batch of eggs in March or April, and that we're kind of in the mid to tail end of that batch. And then those nestlings fledge from the nest and go off and become independent. And then the bluebirds build whole new nests and lay a second clutch of eggs in the second half of the breeding season.
So do they build the second nest on top of the old one?
They will if there's an old nest in there. So they'll, right, if like in a tree, for example, with a cavity in it, they will build nests on top of nests on top of nests on top of nests and basically fill up that cavity with nesting material. They don't reuse a nest that they've just fledged young from, and there's some evidence to suggest that a lot of times they do that because there are mites and stuff on the old nests, and there's often poop from the former nestlings, and so it's not so good for new eggs to be in that environment. But that left us with a great opportunity because they don't reuse the nests; they completely abandon them. So when they're done using a nest, we could take it out of the nest box, and then they could build a new nest in the nest box for the second clutch, and we could compare the nests between the first clutch and the second clutch.
About how many eggs are in the clutch?
So 2 to 5. Yeah. So 2 to 5 eggs typically, yeah, okay. So Ellen asked this question: how do the insulation properties of western bluebird first brood nests compared with the second brood nests? That's what she was interested in, and she spent a long time reading the literature, learning about how to measure insulation, how to measure insulation properties, and came up with a study design. So what she did was first, she took and placed temperature monitors in each of the nests, and here's one now. Just threw it in the bottom of the nest box. So have you seen these temperature monitors? So they're called hobos, and they take and measure the temperature. They're programmable, and they can measure the temperature at regular intervals. So I think she set them to measure temperature once every 30 minutes. And they record the temperature on a little chip inside there. And so at the beginning of the nesting season, she popped these in the bottom of the nest boxes. The bluebirds built the nests on top of it, and we could collect a record of the temperature that was experienced by the eggs in that nest box over the breeding season. So at the end of the breeding season, we go back to the nest box, pull that out, hook it up to the computer, and we have a whole record of the daily temperatures that these birds experienced throughout the whole breeding season.
So you take this and there's a way you can insert it in the computer?
Yeah, so absolutely. That's exactly, yep. So you just connect it, yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like a flash drive, but the only thing that's on there is temperature data. So what do you think she found in terms of temperatures, first clutch versus second clutch?
Hotter in the second clutch.
Hotter in the second clutch.
Later in the season, I've
Yeah.
seen that way.
Hotter in the second clutch. Hotter maximum temperatures, higher maximum temperatures? What about the minimum temperatures? So the coldest it got, is it
Should be warmer.
warmer cold temperatures too? Okay? So you've made a prediction, and let's look at Ellen's data. So Ellen found that in brood 1 here, right, the maximum temperature for the day was cooler than brood 2. So exactly what you thought. And the low temperature for the day was also cooler for brood 1 than brood 2. Okay? So that's what her monitoring of this, and Eduardo, he was the other person that helped with that. That's what they were able to show, that yes, indeed, it is warmer during the second clutch than the first clutch. Okay. Then, what did she do? She collected all of these nests and brought them back to the lab and labeled them. Okay? So here's a sample bluebird nest. Can I take it out? Would it be all right? Would it be all right if I took it out? It can be a little messy. This is a bluebird nest. And pass it around. So there's our bluebird nest. She took the nests out of the nest box when the birds were done with them, brought them back to the lab. Most of the nests were covered with bird poop,
Did you clean them up?
and a lot of them would have other things growing in there. So what she did was she brought them back to the lab, threw them in the freezer. Okay? And anything that's living in there dies. And then she took them and she did a process called depooping, where she took forceps and kind of cleaned them up, cleaned them off, and got all of the feces off of there. And then she would take them and she put them into a drying oven to dry them out so that they weren't all stinky. And that's the result of what she found. So that's a processed nest that's gone through this whole process.
So the temperature, this goes underneath.
Yeah, and it just slides under it, and the birds just build their nest right on top of it. Yeah.
Wouldn't
So how
if
many
they're building
people-
nests on this, wouldn't that make brood 2 a little bit warmer just because the temperature is farther, the things got more stuff on top of it, or?
Well, we went after the first brood. We would go in and pull
pulled
the
it out?
nest out, and so
Okay.
there's nothing in there
There
for
were
the
no
second
nests
nest.
on top of it.
That's right.
When did they did brood 2?
Usually mid-May to sort of mid-July.
Okay.
Yeah.
So they really start right over again.
They really do.
Yeah.
So they kick, the babies fledge, and they're off on their own, and they get back to business, laying a new set of eggs. Yeah.
And you said the second brood starts in around July.
May to July. So so it's not, they don't all build their nests on the same day. So they're not completely synchronous. So sort of late March to May is the first clutch, and then May to July is the second clutch. And we've had them as late as early August before they fledge. Yeah.
So you see them starting to build their nest, and then from that point, it's approximately 2.5, 3 months until they're finished. That's the first.
Yeah, so it's really interesting because the bluebirds, like the male, will come in and he'll put in a claiming stick and say, like, this is my box. And so there's like you'll go and check these boxes, and I'll show you us doing that. You go in and check these boxes, and there's a single stick in there, and it's just sitting there. Yeah, it's just a single piece of something, and he's like, okay, now he's in the market for a female to come along, and once they pair up, she does all the building of the nest. So she builds the nest and incubates the egg, but the male will also help feed the nestlings. So
So it's,
go ahead.
I was, is anyone else doing a study about nests around?
Not around here that I know of. So
Breaking new ground.
yeah, so this
So to
is
speak.
this is yeah this
But
is
the Bluebird Club, through their monitoring, has plenty of data over the years.
that's right. So they monitor the nesting success, whether or not a bird was in this box, if it was a bluebird, or was it occupied by a tree swallow, right? So they have some long-term data. Do you know folks that are in the Bluebird
Well,
Club?
I did it for a short time at Shipley, and
Uh-huh.
I do tree swallow in this box.
Yeah, so
monitoring.
right. So there's lots of data on which boxes do well, which boxes don't do well. People will move boxes around. Yeah, there's a lot. I mean, a lot of really dedicated people that are part of the Bluebird Club, and so we've been super lucky to be able to work with them. Yeah. So okay. So that's the nest boxes. And then she took and made artificial eggs. So I'll pass this around too. So she made artificial eggs. There are these little clay eggs that she has. So I'll pass that around. You can check it out. Have one of each. And what she did was she would take these artificial eggs and heat them up to a known temperature and see how long it took them to cool. And so those are her artificial eggs. Here's these are little temperature probes. So at the end here, it doesn't look like much, but there's a little temperature probe on the end of there, and that gets stuck in the egg and then connected to another different type of data recorder. So it just screws into the back here. And so, again, this is programmable. You could say sample the temperature every second or every 10 seconds. And it takes a measurement of the temperature of the probe. And you can then hook it up to the computer and download the temperature record and see how quickly those artificial eggs cooled in different conditions. So I can pass that around too if you want to check it out. This is, so like I said, remember I said we got a little bit of money to support the work. This is a couple $100 for one of these. And the hobos are, I can't remember, they're like about $10 a piece. So we had what do we have? We had 30 nests, so $300 in those hobos, a couple $100 here. So we're pretty cheap in my lab. We don't require a whole lot of sophisticated equipment, and that's okay with me, right? A lot of the work that gets done can be quite expensive, but we've been really lucky to be able to do some work that doesn't require a whole lot of expensive equipment. Okay, so she took her artificial eggs, connected to the temperature probes that are connected to the temperature recorder, and she would take and pop them into nest boxes. And so the nest box would either have no nest or a nest in it. And this nest box is in an incubator that's set to the average cold temperature for the season. So she'd heat up these eggs to, can't remember, 80 degrees Celsius or something. Pull them out, put the temperature probe in, throw them in the nest box, close the incubator, and let it run until they got to basically the same temperature as the incubator. Okay, so what's going to happen to these eggs in the nest box, in the incubator? After she's heated them up, what are they going to do?
Nothing. They're clay.
They're clay, but what's going to happen to the temperature of
Oh,
them?
they're gonna drop. It's gonna drop.
It's going to drop, right? Yeah, right.
They're not gonna hatch.
They're not going to hatch. Good. I'm glad we don't have to go through
That
that.
was a trick question.
I thought that you were asking.
No. right? So they're going to cool off. And what's going to happen to the egg that's in the box with the nest compared to the egg that's not in the box with the nest?
Cool off much less, more quickly.
Yeah.
Quickly,
Yeah.
sounds like.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So that's exactly what we expected to see, was that in the control box where there's no nest, it's going to cool off faster than the box that has the nest, because the nest is providing some insulation. Okay, so here is a sample of one of her results, and all of her results look just like this. They're amazingly consistent. Here is the heated egg, and it's into the box, and they cool off. Okay, and our experimental nest here is the blue line, and our control box is the no nest. Okay, and so for at any one point in time, the control box is cooler than the experimental box.
They're dropping temperature really quickly.
Yeah, and this is sort of a standard thing, right? Because I think the temperature in the nest box here is 14 degrees C, so not real warm. And it was up at 60 or 80 when she first started.
It's like just less than an hour.
Yeah, so they cool off in pretty quickly.
It's
Okay.
surprising that they're not that much different.
They're not that much different. So there's not a whole, right? So it's 3 or 4 degrees here, maybe difference at some of the points where it's the largest. Okay. So this shows us that the nests actually do insulate the eggs, and that's okay. That's good. But her question was, are first clutch and second clutch nests any different in their ability to insulate? So what she did was you can take and you can calculate how quickly this drops mathematically, and you can get a number. You can say how quickly does it cool per unit time, and she did that for the all. I can't remember now. She did it for all 32 first clutch nests, and then all 26 second clutch nests. She had 58 nests. And here's what she found. Okay, so this is how fast cooling rate. So this is number of degrees that it cools per unit time, and the higher the value, the quicker it cools. And what she found was not what we expected.
Yeah, that's the opposite, isn't it?
Right? So what she found was the first clutch nests cooled eggs more quickly than the second clutch nests.
Did that have to do with outside temperature being later in the season?
Well, so these nests were done the measurements were done in the lab, in the incubator. So we know that the second clutch nests experienced warmer temperatures, but they also did a better job at insulating the eggs. So we're left with a question now, like, how do they do that? Because,
I know from tree swallows,
Yep.
who also do two broods,
Yep.
the first nest is always much nicer, bigger, more well constructed than the second.
Okay.
Because by the second,
They're like, let's just get it done, right?
exactly. Yes, because the tree swallows, the first nest is about this high in the box. The second one's about this high.
Okay. That's really, so I didn't know that about tree swallows.
Yeah.
We asked those same questions about the bluebird nests. So we said, do the first clutch nests weigh more than the second clutch nests? Are they taller? Do they have deeper holes? Are the walls thicker? Right? We wanted to know exactly that, and maybe we should have studied tree swallows. Because right? First clutch, second clutch. How heavy are they? Are they different? No. Are they taller? Is one taller than the other? No. Is the dimensions, the length or the width different? No. Is the cup bigger? No. Is the cup deeper? No. So the pattern that you see with your tree swallows, the bluebirds weren't listening. And so the general features of the nests don't look different first clutch to second clutch. Okay, so that was the easy answer. The hard answer is what comes next. It's like, okay, if it's not bigger, heavier, taller, thicker in one clutch versus the next, what could be different about the nests?
The what do you call it? The
Material.
Yeah.
The material, absolutely. So are they made of different stuff? So that's one thing.
How tightly are they woven?
And the second thing, those are it. So full marks to the people in the front row. Right? No, you're exactly right. Are they made of different stuff, or are they put together in different ways? When we discovered this result, we had already dissected the nests for a separate project, so we couldn't look at your possibility. We couldn't see if they were woven differently. But what we could do, and what we're in the process of doing, is exactly this. Are the nests made of different stuff? Is the first clutch, the first brood made of different stuff than the second? So we have, this is tedious work. So Robert and Austin started this, and now I've got 3 more undergraduates, Emily, Mimi, and Kiara, dissecting and cataloging nests. And we have results from 7 nests. And let me show you. So we separated the nests out. Every nest was separated out into its component parts and then cataloged by what was in it. So what's that category? That's the structural part. Oh, that one's not even sorted.
So this is the base.
So that's the outer part. Here's some of the other stuff.
Oh, these are pretty.
So, and then this is the cup. So these nests haven't actually been sorted yet. So that's what they look like. The female has brought in all of this material one piece at a time, or a couple of pieces at a time. And so now we get to sort all of the things that are in there one piece at a time. And this is what I'm going to talk about next, is why the nests were dissected in the first place, because we were interested in the trash that they use. So we're in the process of sorting these nests, and so we're trying to see what they're made out of. And they're mostly made out of, as you can see, long, thin, sort of natural materials. Pine needles, grass, strips of palm leaves, really thin stems, or the petioles of other leaves that don't have any fleshy bits on them. So they're made of long, skinny stuff. Okay? And so let me show you maybe. Oh yeah, so here's several pictures of nests. And this is the catalog of the natural materials. So we took each box and we said, okay, here's the first nest that was built there, here's the second nest that was built there, in the hopes that we'd be able to see if things are changing within a single location. And what we're seeing is that there's maybe a difference in these monocots, these pieces of grass that they're including. In the second clutch, they're including more pieces of grass in their nests than in the first clutch. And so we're now looking into seeing, well, is grass any good at insulating? And we actually found that monocot, the insulation rating for like straw and hay and other grasses is higher than the insulation rating for like pine needles. So right now we're thinking it could be that in the first part of the season they're putting all sorts of stuff that whatever's available, but the second half of the season there's not as much available and they're using more grass, and maybe that's the thing that's contributing to the difference in the insulation ability of these nests. But we don't know the answer yet. That's sort of still in progress. So So every single piece of nest material, these students are sorting by hand, and they're looking at it and they're saying, what is this made out of? And where does it go? And then we pile all of those up into little piles and weigh them. And so that's how we get this information. Okay. Now the other thing that you saw in those nests, that nest that I circulated around, was the trash. And so I have another graduate student and several undergrads that were really interested in the trash. What are they using? Why are they using it? Is it dangerous for them? So we're really interested in looking at the what they're using and how they're using it in terms of the trash. So Jeannie is a graduate student in the environmental studies program. She's presenting her project tomorrow on campus. Brittany and Sally were two undergrads that were transfer students from, they were at the community college. They were here for the summer. And then Gilda and Sabrina were undergrads at Cal State Fullerton. And so what they all did was they tediously separated out and cataloged and measured all of the bits of trash that they're using. And you can see some nests are really trashy. Yes.
Yeah, some of them are pretty.
Yeah, they probably like that.
Well, so that's a really interesting question that we don't yet know the answer. If they're attracted to certain things, if they
Colors.
if they like colors, right? So we're working on answering that question. And so here's a representative sample of the trash that was in a nest box at Holy Sepulchre Cemetery. Lots of Easter basket grass and tinsel. These are bits of fabric flowers. Lots of plastic. They really seem to like to include plastic straw wrappers and cellophane and candy wrappers. And you can see here's some of that stuff that's incorporated in there. This is kind of lining the bottom of the nest. Here's another one lining the bottom of the nest. This is another.
What is that? Is that cloth?
That's a fabric flower that was left at the cemetery. So people will leave things at graveside, and as they sit there, they often will degrade a little bit, and the birds will pick them up and pop them into their nests. So this is part of a fabric flower. Here's another fabric flower here, a petal or something like that. Here's another nest. This one again has lots of fabric, but lots of plastic in this one. And this one has lots of tinsel, and we're thinking that people will come and bring again decorations. This is also again from the cemetery. They'll bring decorations and leave them by loved ones, and then the birds pick it up and use it. Okay. So we found that the birds were really variable in terms of how much stuff they used. Do you find in your tree swallows, do you find that they use trash at all?
Yeah.
So bluebirds are trashier than tree swallows. Yeah. Okay.
Sparrows do.
Tree swallows won't nest unless it's totally lined with feathers.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's really different. So the tree swallows are really quite different than the bluebirds.
Yeah, and it's at San Joaquin Marsh that we do the monitoring.
So maybe not as much trash.
Yes.
And so that was another thing that we're interested in. Do the birds use the trash in proportion to how much is around? And I'll talk about that in a second. So this one, this has got fishing line here from this one.
Sounds so good.
So this is from the parks, and so the makeup of the trash is a little different at the parks versus the cemeteries versus the golf courses. We had, so I'm working with undergrads, and so they're young, and we had one bird that took audio cassette tape and used a lot of that. And my students were like, "What is this? What this brown filmy stuff?"
Made you feel old.
It did. And it's one of those things that we would recognize immediately, but they were like, "I don't know what this is. It's cassette tape. What are you talking about?" But it shows you how much the world has changed for us. but that stuff is still out in the environment, available for many of these birds to use.
Do you have the data from that specific box as to the eggs and fledglings and all that data?
Yes, so we'll get there. Yes,
Okay.
for the relationship to the trash and
Yes.
and whether or not they are getting entangled.
Yes.
Right. Yes. So
That was gonna be
I'm-
my next question.
we're
Okay.
headed that direction.
I'll
That's
wait.
kind of the culminating piece.
Fishing line makes me
It does. The fishing line does make me nervous, and a lot of the folks that tend these bluebird boxes are really concerned about the trash that's in there. The Easter basket grass can really easily get wrapped. So some people will remove the grass. Some people will cut it up. Some people will take a nest that has been abandoned previously and swap it out.
With another nest?
If there's a particularly trashy nest that they're really worried about. And so we have some information now that we can share back with the Bluebird Club to say what's the relative risk, and so keep your eyes peeled for that. That's coming. Okay. So our first question is, where do they use this stuff? You saw in the nest that kind of went around, there's an inner cup and there's an outer structure, and it sounds like the swallows have a very specific arrangement for how they build their nests. The inner cup is feathered. The bluebirds aren't quite so fancy. They don't line their nests with feathers or anything, but you can separate out that outer structure from the inner cup really easily. And so we were interested in do they put more trash in here or more trash in here? The outer structure of the inner cup. The inner cup is smaller. And so what we found was if we counted all of the stuff that was in the cup and all of the stuff that was in the structure, there wasn't a difference. But since this inner cup is smaller, proportionately, there's actually more trash in the middle part, in the stuff that's closer to the nestlings, than the outer structural part. And that's what we're showing here. The debris mass, the mass of the stuff that's in the inner cup is higher per gram of nest material than in the outer structure. Okay, so they are not including the trash equivalently throughout their entire nest. It's concentrated more in the cup than the outer structure. Okay, and then we've discovered this really crazy thing, which is some of the pieces that are incorporated into the nest are broad. They're not long and skinny like all of the natural materials. They're wide. And they tend to be in places where they're lining the nest. And there's no natural material that's like that they put in their nests. So they're taking these objects that are in their environment and using it in a new way that they don't use natural materials for. And we're like, what's going on here? So
They have the choice, right? They had enough stuff to do the
you,
whole thing.
presumably, yeah, they can make it out of whatever they want. And here, and you saw some of those broad materials, like those fabric flowers. They weren't all crumpled up. They were nicely laid out across the bottom of the nest, like a little liner for their nests. And we saw that was really common. We'd see these broad pieces, and they'd be lining the nests. So here are more, right, broad pieces here, and more broad pieces here, right? If you look at the nest for the natural material, it's all long, skinny stuff. So we were really, and here's a whole plastic bag that they're using here in this nest. And here's fabric and wax paper and plastic bag in this nest, all lining it. And so we're wondering, so here's another one, right? So you can see it's all lining and conforming to the contours of the nest itself. So Jeannie has this idea, this is my student, has this idea that, well, they'd probably like to use natural materials, like sycamore leaves or something like that. But, right, the nest box hole is this big. And something like a sycamore leaf that's big and broad is too stiff to fit through the hole. Whereas the pieces of cellophane or the plastic bags that they're using are much more flexible, and so they don't have any trouble taking those through the hole into their nest box. So we're interested to test that idea to see if we can, put different materials out there that have different levels of flexibility and say, okay, this one is going to easily fit through, they're going to use it for sure, and this one is not going to fit through, and they're not even going to try. Because
Eucalyptus leaves might
yeah,
be
right.
narrow enough to get through.
We don't see it. I don't know why. so it's a mystery right now. It's the next question that I want somebody to work on. To say, okay, let's give the birds a choice of some of these materials. Are they going to use them or not? Because they use these man-made materials, this debris, in this way. Okay. All right. So we have the documented sort of what are they using and how are they using it. Now, why is some birds are really picky about the trash that they use and other birds really trashy? And so what could be influencing whether or not a bird incorporates a bunch of trash into its nest, into her nest?
Accessibility of the
Yeah,
trash.
so if there's a lot of trash around, we were like, that was our first idea. If there's a lot of trash around, that's what they're using. And sure enough, let's see. Oh yeah, so this is just showing the, right? Sure enough, so here's one of the cemeteries, and there's Easter basket grass everywhere, right? All these, this is all Easter basket grass, thousands and thousands of pieces of Easter basket grass. And so what we did was we ran these surveys to look at how much trash is out there. And so we did these surveys where we'd walk through the territories, and if we saw a piece of trash, we'd mark it and measure it and take a picture of it and catalog it and say, okay, this is what's on this territory, and this is what's on that territory, and this is what's on that territory. Looking to see, is there any relationship between the amount of trash that's in a nest and the amount of trash that's on a territory?
But that changes from.
It does. It does. So, and so we found, we tried to do our surveys during the time when they're building nests, but it's hard to do that because they're all building nests asynchronously, and it's hard to get out there at the right time. So we didn't find, so we tried all sorts of fun things. So we didn't find any relationship. So territories with lots of trash on them didn't necessarily have more trash in the nests. And then we had several kind of wacky ideas. Territories that are near playgrounds and park benches that might have more access to trash. Are they trashier? No. Territories that are, and then Jeannie had this brilliant idea that I was just, it would have been great if it worked out. She was like, well, the cemeteries, they have regions that have older plots and younger plots. The older plots get visited a little less than the younger plots. So, right, it's a little gruesome. So is there any relationship between the average age of the plot near a nest and how trashy it was? No. We couldn't find any relationship with individual territories. We couldn't say, this is why this bird didn't build a nest with any trash in it, but this bird built a nest that was super trashy. What we did find was for the site as a whole, right? For the 14 or 15 nest boxes that we did at each location, for the site as a whole, if that site had more stuff, more debris on it, right, then the nests that were in that place also had more debris. So this was one of the cemeteries that had a lot of debris on it. And this was one of the parks that really Every time we went out there, there was almost nothing there because the rangers did an amazing job of making sure that it was very clean. So what we're able to do is sort of in general, we're able to say, if you happen to live in an area where there's lots of trash around, you're more likely to have a bunch of nests that have more trash in them. If you live in an area where there's less trash around, you're likely to find nests that have less trash in them. But we're not able to say, well, how much trash is going to be in that nest? Because we weren't able to figure out yet what the birds are keying in on to use, to decide whether or not to incorporate the trash into there. So
They
one
don't
of
have it. They can't incorporate it.
well, that's what
Unless
we
they're gonna go a
yes,
long way
that's
to
right.
get it.
Yeah, so I think certainly down here that's part of it. But we were really surprised that every once in a while we were at a place where there's it's like there's nothing here, and then you'd find a bird with a ton of stuff in their nest. It's like, where did she get all that stuff?
Is
And-
there any difference between brood 1 and brood 2 nests?
We didn't see any difference between brood 1 and brood 2. Yeah. So one of the things we want to do is we want to put out a surplus of natural materials, and say, okay, if you have lots of natural materials and there's trash around, will you favor the natural materials? So that's one of the experiments we want to do next, is to see, well, it might not be how much trash is around, it might be a combination of how much trash and how much other stuff you have available to you. And so we're trying to figure out what experiment we want to do next to figure that
How
out.
about the range? How far do they go to get the material?
Well, so that's a great question, and so that's I have a project ready for an undergrad. That's basically we can put out materials of known type, different distances from the nest box, and see this type comes from all the way over there, and right. So we label them with little numbers or something, and see how far they'll go to incorporate materials. Typically, people think that the birds will just gather materials from the territory, which is about 40 yards, a 40-yard radius, 50-yard radius, and that's how they place the nest boxes. No closer than 100 yards from one another, so they each have a 50-yard buffer. So we'll see. So you want to be part of that study, figure out how far away they go. We need some new people
They
on.
have to stay within their territory because that's the male must have marked that box and territory.
Right, so males are pretty good at keeping other birds away, although males might not worry if a female happened to come onto his territory, because that might mean another opportunity to have more offspring. I don't think anybody's really looked at that yet.
The female might mind.
The female might mind. So yeah, there's a lot of mate guarding and things. Okay. All right, so I told you to stay tuned. Are nestlings at greater risk for entanglement? And I can tell you, we monitored 72 nests, 227 nestlings. 40 of them died. 2 of them were entangled. And these are nests that have lots of stuff. So there are other environmental things that are a big risk to these. So we had a temperature spike that I didn't show you, but we had a huge temperature spike, and so they overheated, we think, and that's what killed many of those 40 that died. But it seems like the risk of entanglement for these birds is reasonably low, which we were surprised at. People have done some studies of crows, and crows, the rate of entanglement in material is much higher, and they're much more likely to get entangled and die if there's string or baling string in the crow nests.
Do you know what they got entangled with?
Yes. So,
Okay.
so in our case, our two nestlings got entangled by that Easter basket grass. So,
So it's not that safe.
it's not. So it's 2%, right? So if we had over 200 nestlings, 2 of them died from entanglement. 2% or 1%. It's really quite small, but it's still, if there's a way to avoid it, it would be great. And so we're talking with the rangers at these parks about how do you monitor, and they know that there are Easter parties that happen all around Easter, and that's right when these birds are building their nests. And so we're talking to them about, okay, how can we make sure that after these weekend Easter parties that all the Easter basket grass gets cleaned up? Could we do a volunteer cleanup event that is coordinated with Easter? That's okay after the day after the parties, or it would be a Monday, but the day after these parties, come in and do a massive cleanup to make sure that there's not so much Easter basket grass out there. Something like that. Are there ways that we can give back to the people that are trying to manage these places and say, okay, if you want if the birds are important, here are the things that we think that you might do to help them. So that's one nestling. So kind of gruesome, but that's Easter basket grass wrapped around it, and wrapped around its feet. So kind of gruesome, but it happens, right? It does happen. Okay. Finally, okay, so where are we so far, right? We found, right, that the second brood nests are better at insulating eggs than the first, and we're not entirely sure if it's the grass that does it. We're not even sure it makes a difference to the nestlings. So we have some experiments in mind that we think we might want to try to look at nestling development and temperature. They use a lot of different type of man-made debris, a lot of different types of trash. Most of it's that long, skinny stuff: tinsel, Easter basket grass, straw wrappers, really long, skinny stuff, and that's pretty obvious. They don't use like lollipop sticks. Well, we'd be out in the environment, we'd find lollipop sticks and things like that. Those never show up in the nests. And so we can now tell you, we can look through the habitat and say, yeah, they could use that. No, they're not going to use that. Yeah, they could use that. And they
has to be flexible.
Has to be flexible. And we think we know why it has to be flexible, because they'll use big, broad pieces of flexible material, but not inflexible material, right? And this was Jeannie's brilliant insight. Was it's like walking through a doorway holding a broom crossways, right? They can't make it in. So what we don't know is that broad stuff, does it have a function? And if so, what's it doing inside the nest? Is it providing structural support? Is it providing padding? It's so thin it's probably not insulating the eggs any better than the stuff that they're already using. And then we found that we had trashier nests in areas with more trash, but we don't know if they like if they prefer the trash to natural material. So that's an experiment that we want to do. And we don't really yet know how risky it is for these birds. We know that it does happen, but it's happens less often than some of these other things that are a danger to these birds. And so we're trying to work out, can we make recommendations about the sorts of things that we should be mindful of in these environments with respect to the bluebirds. All right. And that's it. So that's all I got.